If Emelie could wish, she would hope she had never loved William, so that her heart wouldn't feel like it was being gnawed by 1,000 ants when she saw him being gentle and considerate to another woman. She had lost her unborn children twice for William, but he showed her no pity or concern. She is not only a powerful assistant in his career but also the acknowledged best candidate for marriage by his parents. Yet William treated her like a disposable sticky note, using her whenever he needed and discarding her immediately afterward. He even condoned the framing/setting up of Emelie by the woman he cared about. Heartbroken, Emelie decided to let go of her feelings for William. However, when he learned that Emelie was going to marry someone else, William knelt on one knee and begged her to come back. Would Emelie easily agree to his request? And who is the formidable rival competing with William for the affections of the beautiful and strong-willed Emelie? Chapter 1. As Emelie was wheeled out of the operating room, she was still recovering from the shock of her miscarriage, feeling lonely and without the support of her family. After spending 3 days alone in the hospital, she received a call from William, demanding her return to work. Despite not being fully recovered physically, Emelie chose to be discharged immediately and headed to the Westward Club where William was located. At the club, Emelie found William with a young woman who was obviously receiving special attention from him. Although she felt pain in her heart as a professional secretary, Emelie still handled the complex situation of the evening with skilled social skills, striving to reduce the atmosphere of excessive drinking and cleverly engaging in conversation with those present. However, throughout the night, William ignored Emelie completely and instead showed unprecedented warmth and care towards the young woman. This made Emelie deeply feel William's indifference and estrangement towards her, as well as his special feelings for the young woman.
Ms. Hoven, tired of missing work yet? If you are, make your way to the Westward Club.
The background noise of his call was filled with the sounds of clinking glasses and a faint, youthful female voice. Emelie moved her lips, wanting to say she was in the hospital.
Ms. Hoven, reply to me.
William repeated with evident irritation. Emelie swallowed her words and rushed out of the hospital without even completing the discharge procedures. She quickly hailed a taxi to the exclusive Westward Club, only having time to apply her makeup during the ride. Upon her arrival, she had walked in while still applying lipstick. She asked the receptionist, "Which private room is Mr. Middleton from Cloudex Corporation in?" The receptionist was momentarily captivated by her presence. However, the receptionist quickly recovered and informed her, "Mr. Middleton is in private room A001. This way, please." Emelie nodded and followed the receptionist to room 001. Out of courtesy, she knocked twice. Then she pushed the door open and entered. The thick scent of alcohol immediately assailed her senses, triggering a wave of nausea. Before she could take in her surroundings, a man said, "Miss Hoven is here. Let her join in the drinking. No need to trouble the newcomer." A customer's laughter followed as he remarked, "Miss Hoven, you're remarkably compliant, aren't you? Showing up simply because you were summoned. Look at how biased Joss Mr. Middleton is. He can't bear to see his new affection get drunk, so he sends you to drink in her stead." Emelie quickly took stock of the situation, her attention drawn to a young woman seated next to William. Though Emelie didn't recognize the woman seemed to know her. "Miss Hoven, I'm sorry, the woman stammered as she apologized. However, she was cut off by William.
No apologies needed. Had it not been for her unexplained absence, she'd be the one here.
His tone was clearly laced with care and favoritism. But William was known for his cold and detachment demeanor. When had he ever stood up for anyone? Emelie gave the young woman a closer look. She was dressed modestly. Her youthful ponytail contrasted with the rowdy atmosphere, giving her an innocent look that tugged at people's heartstrings. Emelie suppressed her emotions as she approached the woman with a practiced smile. She said, "Mr. Garrett, are you enjoying the drinks here? Remember to go easy on your liver." As Cloudex Corporation's head secretary, Emelie skillfully navigated the evening's social intricacies. She managed to alleviate much of the insistence on heavy drinking and, while she did partake in a few glasses of wine, the night turned out to be much more manageable than anticipated. Yet William offered her no response throughout the night. Amid the noise, Emelie caught a snippet of William speaking to the young woman with a softness and warmth tone.
"Feeling tired? I'll take you home shortly."
His voice carried a warmth and gentleness Emelie had never encountered in their 3 years together. After the gathering, Emelie saw each guest off to their vehicle before leaning against a street lamp, shivering as a cold sweat enveloped her. She couldn't identify the source of the intermittent pain spreading through her body. Her lipstick had faded, revealing her lips that were devoid of any color. William's driver noticed her condition. He was aware of Emelie and William's relationship. He said hurriedly, "Miss Hoven, would you like to get in the car first?" Emelie nodded, gratefully sinking into the back seat. 2 minutes later, the car door was opened again. William approached the car with a young woman by his side. He was ready to get in but skidded to a halt at the sight of Emelie waiting by the vehicle. He frowned, annoyed she was taking up space. The woman quickly opened the passenger side door, saying softly, "Mr. Middleton, I'll sit in the front." William slammed the car door shut and said,
"Take Daphne Bowen home first."
Emelie closed her eyes, feeling very weak. Drinking had taken its toll, especially on the 4th day after a miscarriage. As the car pulled up to an old apartment complex, William nudged Emelie awake. "This alley looks awfully dark and unsafe. Go escort Daphne upstairs." Daphne's eyes were big and round, shining even in the dim light of the car. "No need, Mr. Middleton. Miss Hoven is quite tired and it is just a short walk. I'll be perfectly fine on my own." She stepped out of the car as she smiled at William in the back seat with a twinkle in her eyes. "Mr. Middleton, please take Miss Hoven back. Good night." William stopped frowning as he nodded.
"Sure, good night."
Emelie didn't say a word throughout. However, the driver didn't take Emelie home. He was William's confidant. A glance from William was all it took for him to understand what he wanted. He drove directly to the East Bay where William lived. They entered the house together. Before Emelie could turn on the light, she was pressed against the door by William, who kissed her lips. Emelie was stunned for a moment, then immediately grabbed his hands, turning her head away. "Wait, I'm not feeling well today." Disappointment flashed across William's striking face without any attempt to hide it.
"Fine, then make your own way back," he said as he walked towards the dining room.
Emelie turned on the light and saw him take a bottle of mineral water from the fridge, tilting his head back to swallow. His Adam's apple bobbing, sensual and mature. William, the esteemed heir of the Middleton family of Cape Bat City, was impeccable in every aspect. He only brought her to the East Bay when he needed to satisfy his physical needs, a tacit agreement since he'd redeemed her 3 years ago. Emelie didn't leave but walked toward him instead, saying, "If you're in such need, why didn't you keep Daphne just now? You're interested in her, aren't you?" William didn't deny it, his smile ambiguous. "Have you noticed?" How could it have escaped her notice? Emelie quietly asked, "When did this arrangement begin? And what role have you assigned her?" William's voice softened slightly at the mention of Daphne. I encountered her at Cape Bat University a few days back. She's an art student, quite naive. For now, she'll work as a secretary for me. Emelie couldn't help but laugh. While she was in the hospital recovering from her miscarriage a few days ago, he had already brought a university student into his circle. She softly touched William's shirt collar with her finger, her eyes twinkling playfully. University students are fun, right? So fresh and easy to train. She's fine as she is. William caught her chin, his thumb brushing over her lips. He continued with a hoarse voice, but not everyone can be molded as you were. Chapter 3. They moved toward the bathroom where the shower ran like a burst of rain. Suddenly, Emelie's mind drifted to their first meeting 3 years ago on a similar rainy day. Her family once ran a modest supermarket. They weren't wealthy, but they lived a stable and comfortable life as a family of 5. Unexpectedly, her father fell into a trap that plunged them into a debt of $5 million. He was forced to sell the supermarket, their home, and any sellable items. Yet they were still $3 million short. At their wits' end, the person who set the trap showed his true intentions, demanding she use her own body to repay the debt. Her parents tacitly consented. On a rainy night, she fled in panic. The roaring engines of motorcycles sounded behind her, like predators toying with their prey. She lost her shoes and her hair was disheveled. Ahead of her was endless darkness, void of any light. She then fell to the ground, surrounded by motorcycles. She believed her life was over. It was at that moment a business car arrived, blocking her view. She looked up and saw the car door open. A pair of polished leather shoes stepped into a puddle. His trousers were impeccably tailored, and he covered Emelie with a large black umbrella, exuding an air of detached nobility as he offered her protection. He declared, "She's with me. Who would dare to lay a hand on her?" The initial meeting was so stunning that she revisited and embellished the scene in her dreams countless times, ingraining it deeply and making it unforgettable. After the shower, Emelie left the bathroom, her body still damp. She popped a candy in her mouth before looking for clean clothes to change, while William continued his shower. She pondered whether to tell William about her pregnancy and subsequent miscarriage. However, she decided against it after a brief few minutes of contemplation. When he saved her 3 years ago and kept her safe, he made it clear that she shouldn't cause him any trouble. She was a tool to him, useful in both his personal and work life, and a tool must know its place. Moreover, his interest in another woman meant he would care even less, making her revelation pointless. The next day, Emelie went to work as usual. The CEO's secretarial team consisted of 3 secretaries, each responsible for various facets of William's workload. Emelie hadn't actually abandoned her duties as she had submitted her leave form to HR right before being rushed away by the ambulance. Despite her leave, she addressed the critical documents while in the hospital. Yet some daily tasks had piled up, keeping her occupied all morning without a moment to spare for lunch. By 2 p.m. she was visited by the finance department's manager, who reported a problem with one of the documents, an incorrect decimal point placement. Emelie frowned and quickly reviewed the document. "This doesn't seem like something I did." "It was completed by the new assistant Daphne," said the finance manager. After a brief pause, Emelie assured the finance manager, saying, "I have a good rapport with Mr. Garrett. I'll take care of this mistake." The manager said in a low voice, "Someone needs to be held accountable for such a grave mistake, regardless of any fix." Emelie expressionlessly replied, Whoever made the error should be responsible for it. The company's policy was straightforward. A significant mistake within the first month of employment could lead to immediate termination. Consequently, the HR department quickly issued a notification to Daphne. Emelie caught a brief break from her packed schedule and observed Daphne slowly packing her things, tearful and moving with hesitation. The secretariat office was always busy with activities. Hardly anyone spared a moment to consider the situation of an unexpectedly ousted assistant. Daphne left the secretariat with a box in her hand and stumbled upon William. 10 minutes later, Emelie was summoned to the CEO's office. She entered the CEO's office with the documents in her hands and immediately saw Daphne standing to the side. William was sitting in his chair with a pen and a cold gaze. Simply commanded, "Explain." Chapter 4. Emelie questioned, "What exactly does Mr. Middleton wish me to explain?" "Why fire her?" asked William. Emelie plainly explained, she was responsible for the mistake in the Waypoint Corporation contract as a decimal was incorrectly placed. Fortunately, our strong relationship with the client softened the impact. According to our policy, a new employee whose significant error endangers the firm's interests is subject to dismissal and potentially additional consequences. Hearing this, Daphne's face drained of color, a mix of fear and anxiety seizing her. "I was too careless, my apologies." William gave her a look, one that was meant to be reassuring, then said to Emelie, "Show me the document." Emelie put down the document. William flipped through the document to its end, only taking a brief look before tossing it back onto the desk. He said, "This date marks your unexplained absence. Had it not been for your absence, the responsibility of this contract would not have fallen to Daphne, a newcomer." Emelie was incredulous. "Is Mr. Middleton implying the fault lies with me? You're the head of the secretarial department. You should accept the blame." William's response was direct, showcasing an unmistakable bias in favor of Daphne. Emelie suppressed her frustration and argued, setting aside that I was on leave when she joined. Even if she didn't know how to handle it, she could have asked someone else or simply not taken it upon herself. Since she made her own decision and volunteered, she should bear the consequences. Moreover, one must either be a top graduate from a professional institution or have an outstanding work record to enter the secretarial department. An art student hardly qualifies to set foot in there. William asked, "What if I insist on keeping her?" Emelie replied through clenched teeth, "The secretarial department is fully staffed. We don't need an assistant. If Mr. Middleton insists on keeping her, then assign her to a different position." William looked at Emelie. Her lips pressed tightly together, showing a stubbornness reminiscent of how she was 3 years ago. He smirked slightly. "Since the secretarial department is fully staffed, she will replace your position." Emelie was utterly taken aback at his words. A cold realization dawned on her upon grasping his intention. She understood that dismissing Daphne would displease William, yet she had not anticipated such intense repercussions. It seemed that she had misjudged William's fondness for Daphne and overvalued her own significance to him. Daphne hastily approached. "Mr. Middleton, William raised his hand to stop her from speaking, then tossed a document to Emelie. "You're now assigned to the Vinetown project. Don't return to the headquarters until it's concluded." Emelie left the CEO's office and began to pack her things in the secretarial department. The other 2 secretaries asked in surprise, "Emelie, where are you going?" Emelie responded, her voice devoid of emotion, "Mr. Middleton assigned me to the Vinetown project." Assigning her to an external project was a way of implying that she should leave the headquarters. Both secretaries were astonished. There had never been a precedent for a CEO's secretary being assigned out, especially since Emelie was the head of the secretarial department. Moreover, the treatment at a subsidiary could never compare to that at the headquarters. Once she leaves, could she ever come back? Daphne entered, carrying her items to Emelie's desk, her voice shaky. "Miss Hoven, let me assist with packing." Emelie looked at her and asked, "Has Mr. Middleton assigned this desk to you now?" "Mr. Middleton indicated that this seat allows him to monitor me in case of unforeseen circumstances," Daphne replied. Emelie's lips slightly curled. The desk was directly opposite the CEO's office. One could easily observe William at work as long as the door wasn't closed. Previously, she would often lift her head from her work and sneak glances at him. Now, it appeared William intended to monitor Daphne openly, perhaps to safeguard her from potential mishaps like today's. Emelie let out a sigh, feeling as if the pain of her miscarriage was washing over her all over again. As Daphne neatly packed the calendar into a box, she whispered, "I'll dedicate myself to learning and performing my duties flawlessly." "You won't have to worry, Miss Hoven." Emelie harbored no concerns. After all, no one lingered on thoughts of an ex-lover in the light of new affections. Especially when she was never truly considered an ex-lover, but merely a tool that William had grown tired of. Chapter 5. Emelie returned to the house she was renting to pack her bags. "Emelie, you're finally back? I was about to search every hospital in town for you tomorrow if you hadn't shown up today." "Well, everything's fine now," Emelie replied. Emelie's roommate, Mona Hardy, who was also her college dorm mate, had lived together with Emelie for 6 or 7 years. Their relationship had always been good. Throughout her hospitalization, Mona had been the only one genuinely concerned for her. Yet Emelie had not disclosed the full truth to her, merely mentioning she had fallen ill and refusing visits. Mona slipped into her slippers and approached Emelie's room, only to find her squatting on the floor folding clothes. "Preparing for another business trip? You've just recovered from your illness and now a business trip? Is your health up for it? William, that jerk, why does he always have to push you so hard?" Mona was aware of the strain in Emelie's relationship with William and had never approved of him. Emelie didn't know how long she would be away, so she told Mona the truth. "I've been assigned to a project in Vinetown. Mona, I'll extend the lease for another quarter. If I can't return in 3 months, you might need to find someone else to share the rent with. Just let me know, and I'll come back to take the rest of my stuff." Mona was startled. "What? Why so sudden?" Emelie replied, "It's just a shift in position, happens all the time. It would be normal for anyone else. But with Emelie's relationship with William, how could she be sent away?" Mona wasn't fooled as she asked, "Did you have a fight with William?" However, Emelie didn't really want to discuss it. As she stood up to get something, a piece of paper accidentally fell from her pocket. She was about to pick it up when Mona snatched it up first and unfolded it. It was a report from her surgery. Mona was stunned and paused. Silently, she lifted her gaze from the report to Emelie. She noted that the dates matched the days of Emelie's unexplained absence. Mona quickly connected the dots. "Were you hospitalized because of an abortion? The child must have been William's. Did he make you abort the child and then drove you away? Damn him, how could he treat you like this? I'm going to find him and settle this right now." Despite Mona's soft and sweet name, she possessed a core of steely determination. Unlike others, she wouldn't hesitate to directly confront William. Emelie quickly held her back. "Mona, He doesn't know about this. It was an accident, an unintentional miscarriage. Mona frowned. You didn't tell him? Emelie pursed her lips and replied, There's no need for him to know. What are you thinking? Mona said. Emelie took back the abortion report, tore it up and threw it in the trash bin. I didn't think much, just felt that he didn't need to know. Mona struggled to understand Emelie's decision, feeling a deep sense of injustice on her behalf. Emelie went to the bathroom to pack her belongings. Mona gritted her teeth as she picked up pieces of the torn report from the trash bin, saving them just in case. That evening, Emelie took a flight to Vinetown. In the following month, aside from routine updates to the headquarters, Emelie remained disconnected from William. However, she did receive occasional office gossip from the two secretaries, who were friendly toward her. For instance, William went beyond merely mentoring Daphne at work as he also took a personal interest in her well-being. On one occasion he returned to the office to drive Daphne back home when it heavily rained, despite having already left. This act of kindness fueled speculations among their colleagues, with rumors suggesting that Daphne might be Mr. Middleton's mistress. Upon learning of the rumor, William took swift action, resulting in the termination of the individual responsible for its spread. Thus, a new rumor emerged at the headquarters, asserting Mr. Middleton favored Daphne above others. Emelie vaguely remembered when she first started dating William. He also taught her how to work hands-on, and similar rumors circulated within the company. Back then, his indifference to the rumors had been palpable. Over the years, Emelie secured her position at CloudX Corporation through her own work capability, dispelling those scandals. She thought William was heartless and unloving towards everyone. But apparently he does stand up for people, just not her. Emelie instinctively touched her abdomen. More than a month had passed, but no one knew what had been lost aside from her. 2 months later, as the Vinetown project neared completion, her colleagues hinted that Mr. Middleton would pass through Vinetown to inspect the branch office. They advised her to seize the opportunity to seek a transfer back to the headquarters. Chapter 6. Emelie's colleague sincerely suggested to her, Emelie, have you thought about it? Your employment contract is up in a month. If you don't come back, Mr. Middleton might not renew it. Once it expires, it'll automatically be terminated. Even if the contract were to end, you should return to the headquarters to wrap things up. It would look better on your resume. Though Emelie's concerns lay elsewhere, she couldn't shake the need to witness the situation firsthand. On the day of William's branch office visitation, she meticulously applied her makeup and chose a white dress for him and waited at the company's entrance. 10 minutes later, 3 cars drove over and smoothly parked at the company's steps. William was the first to step out of the car. Before Emelie's smile could fully bloom, another figure appeared from the other door, Daphne. It appeared that William and Daphne were as inseparable as the rumors said. Emelie momentarily hesitated but proceeded to greet him respectfully. Welcome, Mr. Middleton. William briefly acknowledged her with a fleeting glance, offering no response before he confidently ascended the steps into the company alongside the branch manager. Emelie admired his retreating figure, noting his preference for impeccably tailored black suits that complemented his physique, enhancing his height, broad-shouldered and strikingly handsome silhouette. Daphne scurried to Emelie, greeting her softly. Hi, Miss Hoven, it's been a while. Her eyes shone with an innocent charm. Emelie responded with a slight nod. As the lead on the project, Emelie was tasked with delivering the key presentation to the CEO. With the presence of international clients, Emelie conducted her entire presentation in aesthetes. Her delivery was both fluent and confident, peppered with gentle humor that elicited smiles of agreement from the audience. The 40-minute presentation captivated everyone, culminating in enthusiastic applause. William joined in the applause, though his expression remained neutral, leaving Emelie uncertain whether his approval was genuine or merely polite. She smiled modestly, bowed gracefully, and descended the podium. As she passed by William, who was seated at the head of the conference table, Emelie pretended to accidentally kick the table corner, softly exclaiming as she bent down. Her tea-brown curled hair, fragrant with gardenias, lightly brushed over his hand resting on the table. Emelie raised her head and her gaze met William. His pupils were dark and bottomless, irresistibly compelling. Emelie pursed her lips, straightened up, and continued on her way. Her seat was past Daphne, who was diligently taking notes. Her hair was obscuring her face and hiding any expression she had. After the meeting, William was the first to exit, with others gradually following. Emelie lingered, methodically organizing her materials until the room was empty, before preparing to leave with her documents. However, a man entered at that moment. The man was about 6'3" and blocked her way effortlessly. Emelie gave a composed smile and asked, "Mr. Middleton, have you returned for something you've forgotten?"
I have indeed forgotten something. William swiftly took her hand and lifted her onto the conference table. He positioned himself between her legs, his hands on the table edge, enclosing her in his embrace. Their closeness was electric with intimacy, as their subtle fragrances intertwined, narrating a tale of longing and reunion. What have you learned for these 2 months? The art of seduction? William's voice was low and suggestive. Emelie caught his tie, whispering, "Are you unjustly accusing me, Mr. Middleton?" He looked down and said, "You wore no perfume at the entrance. Yet by the meeting's start, you were scented. Dare you say it wasn't intentional?" Emelie smiled and replied, "So, Mr. Middleton, you've been observant, huh?" William silenced her with a kiss, leaving her no chance to speak further.
Chapter 7. The conference room door was locked for nearly an hour. Afterward, Emelie took several alcohol wipes and thoroughly cleaned the conference table. With the room back in order, she glanced over to William, who had already reverted to his usual dignified and authoritative demeanor. A closer look revealed a minor crease on his shirt, indicating he was the first to lose restraint just now. Emelie picked up William's tie and walked over to help him put it on. William was accustomed to her attentiveness, slightly lifting his chin to expose his prominent Adam's apple while Emelie's fingers skillfully tied the knot. She softly said, "I want to go back to headquarters." William's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. He observed her submissive demeanor and calmly stated,
"As I've mentioned before, there was no necessity to return to headquarters before completing the project. Now that it's finished, you're free to go back if you wish." Thus, when William concluded his project inspection and headed back to Cape Bat City, Emelie returned with them.
Daphne tilted her head, inquiring, "Mr. Middleton, can Miss Hoven come back with us?" William nodded while reading some documents. Daphne immediately beamed with joy. "That's great. Miss Hoven, I've missed you around here these past 2 months." Emelie observed Daphne. Her makeup was done in vibrant shades of orange and eyeliner that stopped short of extending beyond her eyes, exuding a youthful and charming appearance. "You've put a lot of thought into your makeup," Emelie complimented. Each stroke seemed to accentuate the innocence that men find most appealing, akin to the pure and spirited essence of a young girl. Daphne blinked, offering a slight smile. When they reached Cape Bat City, it was already night time. A driver was already waiting for them.
Take Daphne home first, William instructed. The driver, well versed in unspoken commands, immediately knew the destination.
After being 2 months away, Emelie was deep in thought as she reacquainted herself with the city. When they stopped, Emelie realized they were not at Daphne's previous modest neighborhood but at a luxurious complex near the city center, close to their office. As Daphne exited, she waved. "Thank you both for the ride, Mr. Middleton and Ms. Hoven. Have a restful night and I'll see you both at the office tomorrow." William simply nodded, watching her enter the complex. As the car engine started again, Emelie asked, "Did you buy her a place here?" William's focus returned to his documents. Busy as ever, he offhandedly mentioned,
"It's another apartment of mine. Her old neighborhood wasn't safe, and I didn't want her to feel burdened, so I told her it was rented. Make sure you don't slip up." The naive girl even pays me $1,000 for rent every month. He chuckled to himself, finding it amusing to him.
Emelie pointed out, with Cape Bat City's rates, you couldn't rent a place in this area for less than $5,000 a month. Anyone with common sense would realize the rent is not just $1,000.
William looked up. "So?"
This implied Daphne was portraying a character of self-reliance and independence, playing a long game with a subtle strategy. But he chose to believe Daphne was naive. What could she say? Emelie's lips twitched slightly. "Nothing. Mr. Middleton is truly considerate and thoughtful." Upon their return to East Bay, Emelie barely had time to shower before being overwhelmed by William's advances on the bed. He had been far from satisfied in the conference room, and tonight he was determined not to let Emelie rest easily. His intense desire made Emelie question whether he had been abstinent these past 2 months. "Have you never touched her? I thought you were quite interested in her," Emelie said.
William replied, "She doesn't understand any of it."
"You believe a person in their 20s today doesn't understand such things?" she asked. Even if someone hadn't directly experienced it, they were certainly aware of it.
She comes from a traditional family.
Chapter 8. All of Emelie's enthusiasm vanished into thin air. No matter how many times William tried or what he did afterward, she felt nothing. Good proper upbringing, traditional, disapproves of premarital relations. What did that mean? Was he planning to marry Daphne? Returning to Cloudex Corporation, Emelie found herself demoted from the role of head secretary to general secretary, albeit without any official announcement. Daphne now occupied her former desk, relegating Emelie to the spot Daphne previously held as an assistant. Her new seat was situated by the door in a corner. It was both unremarkable and piled with clutter from being unused for an extended period. The administrative department had not yet organized its cleaning as they were caught off guard by Emelie's abrupt return. It was somewhat embarrassing. However, Emelie decided not to bother the administrative department and cleaned it up herself with a detached expression. Upon Daphne's arrival and noticing the situation, she quickly approached Emelie. "Miss Hoven, I'm sorry, I had intended to come early to tidy up, but I was delayed by traffic. I'll clear this space and return the seat for you now." Emelie was wiping off the dust with a cloth as she responded, "The office supplies are company property, not mine. There's no returning them to me. Mr. Middleton assigned that desk to you, so it's yours to use." Daphne bit her lip, looking guilty. "I'll help you clean up." Emelie ignored her, and Daphne took it upon herself to move the unnecessary items to the storage. When Daphne returned, she made a detour to the restroom to wash her hands and overheard two colleagues gossiping while doing their makeup early in the morning. "Miss Hoven has been brought back, did you know?" "Yes, I heard she came back with Mr. Middleton from Vinetown yesterday. She's probably here today. I told you Mr. Middleton can't bear to part with Miss Hoven." Daphne paused her step. In terms of workability, of course, Miss Hoven is beyond reproach, and said, "Doesn't Mr. Middleton already have Daphne?" The colleague quickly said, "Sure. Have you forgotten about what happened to that person from the marketing department?" "Don't speak so directly," the other retorted. "It's just the two of us here. If neither of us spills the beans, who's going to find out?" It made sense to the colleague. She then continued to share her opinion, saying, "I believe Mr. Middleton has a preference for Ms. Hoven too." "Exactly, Ms. Hoven has been with Mr. Middleton for 3 years. They've been with each other through thick and thin. I think there was a saying that goes, 'You can't move up until there's room at the top.'" After they were done, both of them left the restroom and got startled when they saw Daphne. She pretended to have just walked up and missed their exchange. She greeted them, "Good morning." They responded with forced smiles, "Good morning, you're quite early." They then hastily made their exit. At noon, both Emelie and Daphne were set to accompany William to a client meeting. William seemed eager for Daphne to accumulate experience, hinting that he wanted to groom her for the head secretary position. Emelie was updating William on the details for the upcoming luncheon. Daphne, unable to find an opportunity to contribute, hurried forward to open the car door. However, she winced before managing to open it.
William noticed the change in her expression and asked, "What's the matter?"
"Oh, it's nothing," she said, though clearly in pain as she opened the door.
William's concern grew. "What's wrong with your hand?"
Daphne gently massaged her elbow as she replied, "I just twisted it a bit when I was moving something heavy."
William annoyedly inquired, "What exactly were you moving?"
Daphne quietly mentioned, "Miss Hoven's desk was not cleaned up, so I was moving some items to the storage and ended up twisting it. I didn't think it was serious, but now it hurts when I pull anything."
With those slender arms and legs, what heavy lifting could you possibly do? Don't try to overdo it next time. We have people for that, William said. He then turned to Emelie. "You go ahead to the client meeting. I'll take her to the hospital for a checkup."
Daphne immediately protested, "There's no need, Mr. Middleton. I can just get some ointment after we meet the client." Emelie watched the interaction with detached interest and chimed in. "The client has traveled a long way, and it would be impolite to keep them waiting."
"Emelie, pick up some ointment for Daphne. We'll continue the client meeting without you," William instructed. Daphne said, "Thank you, Miss Hoven." As they drove off, Emelie was left alone by herself. The car was speeding away without her.
Chapter 9. Emelie sighed heavily as she crossed the street to a pharmacy to pick up some ointments. It was there that she received a call from William's mother, Vanessa Rowe. "Emelie, how have you been lately? Why haven't you come to visit us at home?" Emelie smiled and replied, "Auntie, I'm doing well. I've been a bit busy with work recently. Now that it's less hectic, I'll come over this weekend to visit you and Uncle." "Why wait for the weekend if you're free now? Come have dinner with William and us tonight. I'll cook up some of your favorite dishes." "Sure, I'll let Mr. Middleton know," Emelie said. Vanessa playfully scolded, "Stop with the formalities of calling him Mr. Middleton. Feels so impersonal after all these years. We were even discussing your wedding with William a few months back." Emelie nearly tripped over the pharmacy's doorstep. "Their wedding?" She blinked in surprise, not anticipating Vanessa would suddenly bring up such a matter. Vanessa was not William's biological mother but his stepmother. Emelie was aware of the family secrets that had caused a rift between William and his family, resulting in his infrequent contact with them. Vanessa and William's father often learned of his well-being through Emelie, developing a fondness for her as time went on. Emelie believed their affection was purely due to her professional capabilities, unaware that it encompassed thoughts of her marrying William. Emelie felt a mix of anxiety and confusion. She replied, "Auntie, I've got a client meeting soon, but Mrs. Middleton, William and I will come by for dinner tonight." "That's great," Vanessa said. After ending the call, Emelie stood dazed for a moment before hailing a taxi to her appointment. Unbeknownst to her, a car had been parked by the roadside, watching her for some time. The man inside even took a photo of her with his camera. The appointment with the client was set in the most famous hotel in Cape Bat City, serving authentic local cuisine. Emelie passed the ointment to Daphne from under the table and then sat next to William. This client was previously handled by Emelie during their first collaboration with CloudX Corporation, so he warmly greeted Emelie in Aestheties. "Miss Hoven, I haven't seen you in a while. What caused your delay?" "I was searching for you and thought perhaps you'd left the company." Emelie replied in Aestheties. "Good to see you, Mr. Smith. I had to return to the car for a moment to retrieve Mr. Middleton's gift for you. My apologies for being late." She then presented him with a gift. Mr. Smith exclaimed upon seeing it, "Ah, a cultural heritage boat model. I've seen videos of such boat races online. It's a shame we're not in the festival season to see the real thing."
William said, "That's not a problem. If Mr. Smith is interested, we can arrange a visit tomorrow." Mr. Smith was puzzled and asked, "Tomorrow?"
Emelie explained, Mr. Middleton had recently invested in an exceptional factory known for manufacturing boats of cultural heritage. This model is just one of their creations, and the factory houses genuine historical boats as well. If this catches your interest, we could arrange a visit by tomorrow. Mr. Smith agreed enthusiastically, praising Emelie for her thoughtfulness. Mr. Middleton is fortunate to have such a secretary. William cast a glance at Emelie, acknowledging her versatility in any setting. Looking at her now, who would guess that just 3 years prior she was the so-called country bumpkin struggling with aesthetics? Upon returning from the restroom after lunch, Emelie caught the sound of Daphne's tearful, faltering voice outside the dining room. She lamented, I'm such a fool, unable to assist you or do anything right. How I wish I were as competent as Ms. Hoven."
William teased, "Why compare yourself to her?"
"It's just that everyone seems to admire Ms. Hoven. The colleagues, the clients. I really wish I could be as helpful to you, Mr. Middleton," Daphne said.
"Just being by my side is helpful enough. Isn't keeping the boss in a good mood a talent?" William replied.
Daphne's tears turned into laughter. Emelie felt a lump in her throat and decided against going inside. Instead, she took a taxi back to the office by herself. An hour later, William and a visibly joyful Daphne made their way back. Upon seeing Emelie, Daphne paused momentarily before inquiring, "Miss Hoven, did you return by yourself?" It was evident they had completely forgotten that she had also attended the client meeting with them.
Chapter 10. Before getting off from work, Emelie entered the CEO's office to drop off some documents. She then mentioned, "Your mother called me at noon, inviting us for dinner tonight. Mr. Middleton, it's been half a year since you last visited." William furrowed his brows. He was visibly annoyed. "Do you often contact my family?" "Not really. It's always your mother who calls me," Emelie responded. William glanced at his watch and tossed the car keys to her. You drive. I'll have a driver take Daphne home. As she followed him, Emelie found herself at the edge of asking something significant, but couldn't muster the courage to voice it. She feared hearing the answer she already knew would come. During the Middleton family dinner, Vanessa kept adding more food to Emelie's plate, expressing concern. "Why have you lost so much weight? You look so pale. Are you sick?" William, naturally reserved and taciturn, was even more so with the Middleton family. He barely spoke after greeting his father, Henry Middleton, upon their arrival. He watched Emelie manage the conversation with his parents while Emelie touched her face, smiling as she replied, "Oh, it's probably just today's lipstick not suiting me. I'll throw it out when I get back." As CloudX Corporation's CEO's head secretary, Emelie was adept at saying the right things, delighting Vanessa. Suddenly, William remembered Daphne's words from earlier. Indeed, everyone liked Emelie. Not just colleagues and clients, but the elders too. She had seamlessly integrated into both his professional and personal lives over the past 3 years, dealing with matters both within and beyond her scope. Thus, his parents and friends had silently thought she would become his wife, even discussing their marriage more than once. William couldn't help but smirk at the thought. As he expected, the topic of marriage came up again at dinner.
After bracing herself all afternoon, Emelie still found herself lost for words, looking toward William for some guidance. William casually sipped his water. His voice was devoid of any warmth or flavor as he stated, "I won't be marrying her." The piece of rib Emelie had just picked up fell back into her bowl with a soft clink. But what William said landed heavily in her heart, fracturing it like glass under pressure. For a moment she couldn't hear her own heartbeat. Henry questioned in a low voice, "If you're not marrying Emelie, then who? That young secretary from the company? Don't think I'm unaware of the foolish notions you've been up to, Mr. Middleton." Emelie instinctively wanted to diffuse the sudden tension, a role she often played in their father-son disagreements.
William's face showed nothing but frosty aloofness, like feeling his boundaries had been breached. "Dad, you're intruding too much. And regarding foolish actions, you've had your own share in the past. Wouldn't you agree, Mrs. Middleton?" Vanessa's face stiffened. Henry slammed the table, standing up as he roared, "Asshole!" William grabbed a napkin and stood up as he said, "I've finished. I'll be leaving now."
As Henry's complexion turned a stormy shade, Vanessa quickly offered him some water, trying to calm him down. "Relax, dear. Remember your blood pressure problem. Try to stay calm." Emelie instinctively tried to create an excuse for William, saying, "Mr. Middleton had a tough time with the clients today, and that's why he's upset." Henry was rubbing his temples and countered, "I'm well aware of his temperament. There's no need to defend him." Vanessa tried to smooth things over and said, "Will is now the CEO of such a major corporation. You can't still talk to him like he's a child. Let it be." She then turned to Emelie and added, "I'm sorry you had to witness that, Emelie. Please go check on William. Feel free to use any of the cars in the yard." Emelie didn't really want to check on William. Once, the memory of their first meeting provided Emelie with comfort, giving her strength to endure any challenge. However, she now hesitated to follow him. The mere sight of William, especially after her miscarriage, left her feeling drained and apprehensive about any confrontation. Yet, unable to refuse the Middletons' request, she could only nod in response. She then took the car keys from the butler and drove off after William. It wasn't long before Emelie spotted William's car on a serene street side, where he stood deep in thought and smoking. Chapter 11. Emelie parked and walked up to him. "Mr. Middleton." The dim streetlight on the path faintly outlined William's stern expression. He didn't look at Emelie, the tip of his cigarette flickering in the dark. Emelie sighed inwardly, glanced around, and noticed a 24-hour convenience store nearby. She headed to the store, picked up a chicken sandwich, and made her way back. "You barely ate anything tonight. Have something to feed your stomach so you don't get a stomachache again." William glanced at her and took the sandwich. Emelie spoke in a low voice. "Even if you're dissatisfied with what Mr. Middleton Sr. said, you shouldn't have talked back to him in such a manner. He's prone to high blood pressure and was even hospitalized at the end of last year."
Suddenly, William let out a cold laugh and threw away the sandwich. He swiftly grabbed Emelie, opened the car door, and pressed her into the back seat. His movements were seamless, leaving Emelie feeling like the world is spinning around her.
Her nerves exploded and she blocked William. "Mr. Middleton. Not here, please."
He restrained her hands above her head, his tone devoid of any warmth. He chillingly said, "Even Ms. Hoven has learned to say no? I thought you were everyone's favorite." Trapped in the cramped space of the back seat, his presence was overwhelming.
Emelie paused before asking the question burning inside her. "Who claims I'm everyone's favorite? Clearly, Mr. Middleton, you aren't fond of me. But what about Daphne? Do your feelings for her run deep, or are they merely passing fancy?" She initially believed William's interest in Daphne to be nothing more than a fleeting curiosity or a mild attraction. Yet his tolerance of Daphne's stance on premarital relations took her by surprise, indicating she may have misunderstood the nature of their relationship. Her previous misjudgment had led to a 2-month exile. Now, any misjudgment seemed to spell the end of whatever was between her and William. She could have chosen not to ask. There was virtue in obliviousness, in not seeking too deep, pretending nothing happened so everyone could live in peace. Since she was saved by him 3 years ago, she had fallen hopelessly in love with him. She thought that she was content to be by his side, even if it meant losing her dignity to become nothing more than a tool. After all, if not for him, she would have ended up in a far worse state at the hands of those people 3 years ago. But that wasn't the case. Human nature craved more with every inch given. And from the moment she had fallen for him, she had greedily wanted everything she could not have. As she watched the affection blossom and even the marriage she longed for being extended to someone else, her patience had worn thin, leading her to finally voice her thoughts. Had he truly fallen for Daphne? Was it the kind of affection that led to marriage? William remained silent, his gaze fixed on her in the dim light. However, his quiet almost served as an admission. Emelie softly laughed. "You wish to marry her, yet you're here with me. Doesn't that seem somewhat disloyal?"
"You're merely a tool. How does loyalty come into it?" Before he could finish speaking, a slap landed swiftly and accurately on William's face. It wasn't forceful, but Emelie hadn't expected herself to make such a move. Their eyes locked. William felt the sting of being hit for the first time, particularly by the woman he least respected, chilling him to the core.
Emelie might have referred to herself as a tool, but hearing it from William inflicted a different kind of pain. She slapped him, but she had no regrets. She even felt herself trembling. For the first time, she understood the sensation of trembling with rage.
William's gaze turned cold as he spotted the tears in her eyes, irritation surging within him. He abruptly stood up and tugged at his collar. He then irritably said, "Get out."
Emelie pursed her lips and quickly tidied up before stepping out of the car. Just as she was about to shut the door, William drove away hastily. As she gazed at the diminishing lights of the car, a profound weariness enveloped her, becoming more oppressive by the moment. She felt as if she had reached her limit. An invisible force seemed to be compelling her to leave. This opportunity to leave happened surprisingly. Chapter 12. The next morning, Emelie joined William in welcoming Mr. Smith from yesterday to the boat factory. CloudX Corporation focused on venture capital and emerged as one of the nation's top investment firms with extensive projects and influence both domestically and internationally. It played a key role in backing government-supported projects, notably this cultural heritage boat factory. Emelie had managed to compose herself from last night's emotional upheaval. Now she's perfectly embodying the role of a CEO's secretary by William's side. She spoke when needed and remained silently observant when not. There was a diverse collection of cultural heritage boats displayed inside the expansive factory. Each boat was vibrant and unique. An elderly factory manager led them through the exhibits, earning repeated expressions of admiration from Mr. Smith. These boats are only 60 feet. We're in the process of constructing the longest cultural heritage boat in the world, targeting to be 330 feet. Once it's complete, we intend to apply for a Guinness World Record to bring global recognition to our cultural heritage boats, the manager said with pride. 330 feet? That's taller than some buildings. It must be a spectacular sight on water. Could I have the honor of seeing it? Mr. Smith was visibly amazed. Of course, it's actually right above us. Have a look, the manager replied with a smile. As everyone looked up, they saw an enormous boat suspended from the ceiling, its full length extending beyond their view. It occupies too much space on the ground, so hanging it was the best solution to conserve space. We've only finished the basic structure. A lengthy process still lies ahead. The next step is the completion of the body structure, explained the manager. While all eyes were on the boat, Emelie sensed as if someone was targeting her with their gaze. She scanned the area and spotted a tall man in a corner. The man's face was concealed by a hat and mask. He was aiming a long focus camera in their direction. Emelie frowned as she asked, "Factory manager, who is that person?" The manager glanced over. "He claims to be a blogger, someone who posts stuff online. Hearing about our cultural heritage and the 330-foot boat, he wanted to capture it. I thought it'd be good publicity, so I allowed it." Emelie considered the man's focus could logically be on the uniquely lengthy cultural heritage boat, especially as they stood right beneath it. She thought she might be overthinking it. Emelie shifted her focus back, just as William extended his hand to her, catching her off guard. She hesitated as she was uncertain of his intentions. William's hand hovered midair for a good 20 to 30 seconds until he frowned at Emelie. It took her a second to realize he was asking for a wet wipe for his hands. A man with his cleanliness habits would naturally want to clean his hands after touching anything. Previously, Emelie would keenly observe his every action, memorizing all his habits and understanding his needs from a mere glance or gesture. But today her attention was elsewhere. Emelie handed him a wet wipe from her bag when she felt a pang of surprise at her own lapse in attention. Her thoughts were not as centered on him as they used to be. This moment of neglect caught William's eye, prompting him to observe her more closely than usual. The previous night's slap didn't leave any mark. It was as if the incident had never occurred. Daphne was also present. She noticed William's prolonged gaze on Emelie, and a sentence crossed her mind. "You can't move up until there's room at the top." Daphne suddenly called out, "Ms. Hoven." As Emelie turned, she caught the man taking photos in her direction again. She was certain it wasn't a misperception this time, as he was focusing directly on her. She thought about confronting the man but decided against it with Mr. Smith around, to avoid creating a scene. She figured there would be time to address it later as the tour was almost over. "What is it?" Emelie asked, turning to Daphne. Daphne said softly, "Does the company profit from such projects?" "It's not about financial gain," Emelie explained. "So it's about reputation?" "I understand now," Daphne responded with a sweet smile. After a quick look at a wall sign labeled "For," Emelie proceeded to follow William. As their visit wrapped up and William was about to invite the clients for lunch, a sudden warning came from the second floor. "Danger! Move away." The instinctive reaction to the warning was to gaze upwards. As they did, they saw the 330-foot cultural heritage boat start to tip alarmingly as its ropes gave way, sending it crashing toward the ground. Without a moment to spare, Emelie reached out for William but only caught air. Boom! The boat crashed down, chaotically scattering the crowd beneath. Emelie was delayed by her attempt to reach William and couldn't evade in time. Her lower leg was struck and she elicited a sharp cry of pain. Yet it was the emotional pain that cut deeper. She glanced up and realized William had instinctively chosen to shield Daphne instead of her in that critical moment. Could his affection for Daphne have grown so deep? Looking down at her injured leg, a bitter chuckle escaped Emelie. 3 years of unwavering devotion, all seemingly in vain. Chapter 13. The accident happened suddenly and it was entirely unexpected. Chaos ensued at the scene as people scrambled to clear the debris and rush the injured to the hospital. Fortunately, the cultural heritage boat was merely a framework and not particularly heavy. Emelie's lower leg was struck, but an X-ray showed no fracture. Had the boat been complete, its considerable weight in the tons would have resulted in a much more severe injury. However, the incident had left Mr. Smith unconscious, necessitating an explanation. While the injured were being attended to, the factory manager quickly investigated what had happened. It turned out one of the hemp ropes holding the cultural heritage boat aloft had loosened, causing the boat to lose balance and triggered the accident. The critical question was why that particular rope had come undone. In the hospital room, the factory manager lamented. "The loosened rope was marked number 4, but we have no surveillance in the factory, so it's unclear how it happened." According to witnesses, only one person had been near that spot before the accident occurred, and it was William's expressionless face was recognized by those who knew him well as his expression of anger. "Who?" The manager hesitantly glanced in a direction. It was. Emelie was propped up in her hospital bed as she suddenly spoke up. "It was me." William looked at her. She presented a sorrowful image with her hair in disarray, clothes stained, and a thick bandage around her slender leg. It brought back memories of the previous night when she had gazed at him with tears in her eyes, equally pitiable. He inhaled deeply, his voice cool as he asked, "What were you doing there?" "I was answering Daphne's question about the profitability of investing in the cultural heritage boat factory," Emelie replied truthfully. The factory manager appeared even more distraught. "Profit? The cedar wood we use for the cultural heritage boats took us 5 years to source. Without the right wood, a 330-foot boat is impossible to build. Now that it's damaged, I don't even know if it can be repaired. The loss is significant."
William asked, "Did you touch the rope?"
Emelie responded clearly, "No, I didn't." But just after Emelie spoke, Daphne interjected in a low voice. It seemed like there was. Emelie and William both looked her way. Despite Daphne being the least hurt with only a scraped palm, she still received medical care because William insisted. Her watery eyes met theirs from her seat on the edge of the bed. Emelie straightened up. It seemed like there was. What does that mean? Daphne was intimidated by her cold tone and stammered. Miss Hoven, I remembered you seemed to pull on the rope, so I thought.
Go on, William urged.
So I thought. Perhaps that accidental tug loosened the rope. Mr. Middleton, I'm sorry. I had no idea such a small action could lead to serious consequences. Had I known, I would have stopped Miss Hoven, possibly preventing this from happening. Emelie stared in disbelief. She had tolerated Daphne's manipulations, understanding that the reason fell short of bias. But Daphne's outright accusation was beyond her expectations. Emelie's expression grew significantly colder. Repeat what you just said. What did I touch, Mr. Middleton? Daphne whimpered, retreating behind William and adopting a pitiful guise.
I'm asking her the question, William said, looking at Emelie.
Emelie was aware that William intended to restrain her from speaking. Daphne's tactics seemed ludicrous to Emelie. Yet William's rebuke brought her frustration and resentment to a peak. So you believe everything she says? Emelie challenged.
Which of her statements isn't the truth? William countered.
Daphne timidly added, Mr. Middleton, I'm not lying. We can check the surveillance. Everything I've said is true. Emelie exploded. Didn't you hear the manager? There's no surveillance in the factory. What was Daphne acting at? Her voice rose with each word until William sharply rebuked her. Shut up. Have you yelled enough? Emelie was taken aback. She felt as though her entire body had been encased in ice, growing stiff and rigid until she couldn't move at all. While William's temperament was far from perfect, he had never lost his temper with her in all 3 years. This was the first time he had ever told her to shut up. Daphne's eyes welled with tears, her voice barely a whisper as she spoke. Mr. Middleton, I didn't lie. I searched the findovel.net website on Gmail to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality.
I believe you, William said, his simple words causing Emelie to feel her resolve crumbling. He then turned to Emelie and asked, You've been distracted today. Are you sure you didn't touch anything?
Emelie was stunned and leaned back against the headboard as William began to seem like a stranger to her. She had been by his side for 3 years, handpicked by him as his head secretary. She had never made even the slightest mistake in both his work and personal life. Why would he believe she'd commit such a fundamental error, solely based on Daphne's accusation? She spoke each word deliberate. If I had accidentally touched it, I would admit it.
Before she could finish, William interrupted, taking her words out of context. So, what are you denying now? Daphne saw you with her own eyes. Would she falsely accuse you?
Emelie found the situation absurd and couldn't help but laugh. Would she falsely accuse her? Of course, she would. But a clear disdain could be heard through her laughter. It wasn't Daphne's accusations that stung the most, but William's blind trust in her. What did her 3 years of loyalty mean to him? What was she in his eyes? Chapter 14. Ouch. Daphne let out a soft scream as the nurse was disinfecting her wound.
William immediately approached and asked, How was it?
It's just a scratch, I'm fine, Daphne replied. She then showed concern for him. Mr. Middleton, how about your shoulder? Does it hurt? You should really get it checked by a doctor.
William had injured his shoulder while shielding Daphne from being hit by the boat's edge. It's fine, William said indifferently. He carefully instructed upon seeing Daphne's palm. Avoid getting the wound wet before it heals to prevent infection. I'll arrange for a caretaker to look after you.
I'm capable of taking care of myself. You shouldn't always treat me like a child who knows nothing, Daphne said. As Emelie watched their intimate interaction, her growing exhaustion and disillusionment finally crashed over her like a wave, leaving her submerged in resignation. Everything she had done was pointless. Emelie silently shifted her injured leg off the bed and attempted to stand, the sharp pain shooting from her foot to her heart. She had nearly been crippled, yet William hadn't shown her any concern. Meanwhile, Daphne received his constant attention over a mere scrape, even getting assigned someone to take care of her. She gave an expressionless smile and decided she couldn't bear it any longer. It was time for a confrontation. "Do you really want to stick to your story, Daphne?" she questioned. "Miss Hoven, I've always respected you and want to support you. However, given the gravity of today's events, lying isn't in my nature," Daphne replied. Her claim of "lying isn't in my nature" implied she stood by her words, suggesting she wouldn't outright lie to frame Emelie. Emelie understood the meaning beneath her words. However, she sought a direct answer, so she pressed further. "Did you really see me touch the rope with your own eyes?"
William was the first to grow impatient. "How many times do you need to ask?"
Daphne calmed him softly. "Please, Mr. Middleton, calm down. Miss Hoven is merely seeking confirmation from me, and that's all right. We both played a part in this incident. I failed to alert her and she interacted with the rope, so I should also bear responsibility. Once Mr. Smith is conscious, we should both apologize to him," Daphne continued.
"You're not at fault here," William said, furrowing his brow.
Emelie ignored William's interjection and focused on Daphne's confirmation. "If I uncover evidence proving you lied, Daphne, how will you apologize?" Emelie challenged. Daphne hesitated, not fully grasping Emelie's intent until she proposed. "How about a slap bet?" After all, it was her words that were causing trouble.
William's anger was palpable. "Have you had enough? Do you want to escalate the situation further?"
Emelie fixed her gaze at Daphne. "Afraid to bet? Weren't you confident in what you saw? Or are you admitting to lying?" Daphne blinked. The tension was rising in the room while it was filled with the factory manager, colleagues, and medical staff. All eyes on her. Emelie cornered her expertly. If Daphne refused the bet, it would cast doubt on the reliability of her claims. Backing down wasn't an option, especially in William's presence. What kind of evidence could Emelie possibly uncover without surveillance in the factory? Perhaps she was merely attempting to intimidate her. Daphne understood Emelie was bluffing, aiming to unsettle her with fear. Both were aware of the truth regarding the incident. Emelie's strategy seemed to be applying pressure to provoke a retreat from Daphne, which would give Emelie a tactical advantage. Recognizing the tactic, Daphne saw it as her moment to decisively expel Emelie. She met Emelie's gaze firmly, affirming, "I am accountable for everything I've said and am ready to accept that bet with you, Ms. Hoven. I'm just wondering, how long will your investigation take? Doctor, is Mr. Smith awake?" The doctor got caught up in the unfolding drama and immediately replied, "Yes, he's already awake." Daphne feigned concern. "Mr. Middleton is about to explain the accident to our client, and we might not have the time to wait for your thorough investigation." She suspected that Emelie aimed to delay, betting on William's anger cooling down to escape any repercussions. Daphne was determined not to let Emelie's plan work. Chapter 15. To everyone's surprise, Emelie simply stated, "10 minutes is all I need." Daphne was caught off guard and William's brows knitted. Emelie bore the pain in her leg as she leaned on the bed railing for support and approached the factory manager. "Manager, I need to speak with you in private." "Of course, go ahead," the factory manager quickly responded. Emelie said in a low voice, "Could you please call over the blogger who was taking photos in the factory? I saw him helping with bringing the injured to the hospital, and he should still be in the emergency room." The factory manager paused, then whispered, "All right, I'll go get him now." Emelie nodded. "Thank you." Their whispered conversation went unheard by the rest.
William's gaze on Emelie was cold and detached, while Daphne appeared visibly anxious. Was Emelie just bluffing, or did she genuinely have something up her sleeve?
The factory manager wasn't gone for long before he returned with a black bag, piquing everyone's curiosity about its contents. He informed Emelie, "The young man said he knew why you were looking for him. Since he was unable to come, he gave this to me instead of coming himself." Emelie took the bag, opened it, and found a camera inside, the exact reason she sought him out. Surprisingly, the man had anticipated her request. Emelie began to search through the photos without wasting time on further thought. She had been right to suspect she was the focus of the photos in the camera, with the most recent ones predominantly of her. Daphne couldn't help but inquire, "What's that camera for?" "It belonged to a young man who photographed the boat today. It's his camera. I'm unsure why the secretary needed it. Maybe he captured something significant," the manager explained. Daphne clenched her fingers tightly out of sight, a flicker of unease in her eyes. Emelie scrolled through the albums until she stumbled upon a video. After watching it briefly, she paused it. She faced the camera toward Daphne and confronted her. "You claim to have seen me tampering with the rope, yet how do you explain this?" The footage was captured perfectly, showing Emelie and Daphne near rope number 4, and Emelie's hands never once reaching for it. As everyone gathered to watch, the video's 4K clarity and unobstructed view left no doubt about what happened, nullifying any chance of fabrication. How would Daphne explain her firm assertion that she saw Emelie tampering with the rope? The room's focus shifted to Daphne, including Williams. Daphne began to pale, realizing the evidence was against her. Emelie advanced with the camera in hand, pressing, "How do you explain now?" Daphne instinctively retreated, stammering, "I didn't expect that I'd actually find proof, or that I'd find it so swiftly." Daphne was at a loss and bit her lip in reluctance. How could it be such a coincidence? If not for that opportune video, Emelie would have had no escape. "So, you thought I had no way to explain myself unless by some fluke chance that someone took a picture. Is that your line of thinking?" Emelie continued. Daphne fell silent, outmaneuvered by Emelie's sharp deduction. After all, Emelie was the head secretary at Cloudex Corporation, seasoned in navigating the corporate world far before Daphne even finished her studies. Avoiding a fight with Daphne didn't mean she was incapable of winning. She had seen through far too many naive schemes like Daphne's. "Even without the video, I could have gone to the police. Would my fingerprints be on the rope?" "A simple test would tell," Emelie said. Daphne was rendered speechless. Emelie continued, "You thought you could frame me with a flawed and naive plot. Why did you believe it would work? Because you thought you had support, you assumed I'd just swallow the defeat as before?" Daphne was lost for words and desperate. She turned to William for support. "Mr. Middleton." As she looked his way, Emelie's hand moved swiftly, delivering a sharp slap to Daphne's face without holding back. Daphne was caught entirely off guard, tumbling onto the bed as the room fell into stunned silence.
William reacted by seizing Emelie's wrist, his voice laden with authority as he roared, "Emelie Hoven,